What is fan engagement and why should all sports work with it every week? Hi and welcome to another fresh episode with Sportviews podcast. For those who are new listeners to season 3, my name is Jacob Wickenstall and I'm the host of the Sportviews podcast. It's a podcast where we interview new perspectives that you never heard before, and we dive into interesting conversations with unique people and get to know their stories from the sports world. Basically, we take you through an exciting journey behind the sports front stage. We do this third season together with our collaboration partner, Sportidealisten, the job platform only for the sport industry. Find your dream job or dream candidate today. Head over to sportidealisten.com to learn more. And now, let me introduce you to today's guest. Bas Schnater. He got hooked into fan engagement at a conference in Australia and is nowadays one of the best-known experts on fan engagement and CRM in Europe. He's basically applying data analytics and science to improve fan engagement and to improve revenues in sports clubs. He has been and is still a consultant for football leagues throughout Europe and the UEFA, as well as guest speakers for various educational institutions. With that said, welcome to the Sportviews podcast, Bas Schnater.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for having me. What an honorable introduction.
Well, happy to have you here, and thanks for joining us. And yes, we could already hear you have an interesting background and also an interesting story that you have told in previous podcasts that you've been part of before. Mm-hmm. And for those that don't really know you, how would you present yourself except what I just said?
That's always a tricky question. I think as a fan engagement specialist, trying to better the football world by making football clubs connect to their fans in a right way and therefore increasing revenues. I think that's the best order. First fan engagement, that results to revenues.
All right. And you study sport marketing in the beginning of, now it's quite a long time ago, 2007 in the Netherlands. I'm curious just to, since it was such a long time and now you have come so far in your career, do you remember why did you pick that program in the beginning?
Yes, that's a very nice question, actually. It's true. I graduated in 2012. So that is already 9 years ago. Feels like yesterday, but it's longer time ago. No, the reason why I picked this program because, of course, after high school you need to pick a program, and I was sports fanatic and interested in business, but not in the traditional way how business was done. And then I saw this sports marketing program, sports management program, and I know it triggered me because as I said, apparently I can make a living out of something I really like to do, which is often the motivation why people are active in sports anyways. And back in those days, the program was still a lot around sponsorship, a lot around how can we make the best service for sponsors. And along the way of the program, because as I said, I started in 2007, but finished in 2012 with a half a year, a bit of a gap in between. But while following the program, I noticed that the word fans was not mentioned, not dropped one single time. It was always about sponsors, events, and those kind of things. And I had a season ticket for Ajax for years already, and it triggered me thinking, hey, why are we not mentioned? Why is there not, aren't we the consumer? Aren't we the customer of what you're servicing? So I found it really weird. So that kind of settled in my mind. I kind of accepted it, but it kind of settled in my mind. And later on, I discovered that this area was fan engagement. But yeah, I was already triggered back then.
And what I've understood from previous podcasts that you've been part of is that you sort of found your passion and this true calling around fan engagement in Australia. at a conference. Can you please share a little bit what you discovered?
Yes. So when I graduated 2012, I basically the previous economic crisis was still hitting Europe hard. So I thought, okay, if I want to gain experience in sports straight away, and there's a big crisis here. Obviously, jobs are very low then in sports because that's one of the first things that get cut away. Very, very like a cyclical industry. So I went to Australia, and there I got, by luck, I got approached on LinkedIn by someone organizing sports conferences, saying like, "Hey, I noticed you're in Melbourne. I'm organizing in 2 months and organizing a conference in Sydney. Would you be interested in working for me?" Yes, of course. That's the whole reason why I went to Australia, to gain experience. So negotiated. Yeah, you pay my hotel and flight, and I mean, so and that at that conference in Sydney, the Achieving Bigger Crowds conference, sort of everything that I just mentioned about me being a student in a sports marketing degree, everything going about sponsors, about the events, nothing about fans. There, all of a sudden, everything clicked. There was, I think, Daniel Wilson from City Football Group, who was speaking there around surveying fans and showing how they can improve the fan experience, and about the city square that they built in front of the stadium. And there was Bart Wiley, who's until recently he was still at the Seattle Sounders as I think the VP of commercial, whatever, speaking around how to create the best fan experience inside the stadium. And all of a sudden, everything just connected together. Like, hey, wait a minute. Apparently within sports marketing, there is a substream that cares about the fans, not just about the best type of caviar that you could serve in hospitality rooms. And there was Mark Bradley, which is for me still the godfather of fan engagement. Who was speaking there at the conference, also on the work that he's doing in Europe, European football. So that was amazing to finally see how fans are taking seriously, and that's the moment that for me it clicked. Understanding like, hey, this is something that we do not have enough in Europe. So when I came back after a year in Australia, I immediately set up my consultancy called Fan Engagement, which I still have today. With the website and everything, and that's the moment that I sort of devoted my professional career into this area.
And when you're mentioning Mark, by the way, did you like connect with him in some way, or manage to get a hold of him at the moment back then, or have you have any sort of conversation with him now throughout your career so far?
Yes, immediately. Mark Bradley was for me spot on. It was immediately the person that talked about all these topics. Take fans seriously, do your research, improve the fan experience. So me being a bit of like a Dutch person who's not afraid to jump into a conversation and sometimes a bit untactical as well, as we are. But yeah, I hope the world forgives us for that. But yeah, immediately I ran up to Mark saying, "Hey, this is amazing. I want to learn more from you." And luckily, social media were still like 4 or 5 years old, so still in its infancy. But it was quite easy to stay in touch with him. And actually, I've worked with Mark on a few projects. I work for Mark on a few projects now. So that professional friendship, I would like to call it, has been growing over the years. And now I got the opportunity to work sometimes for him and with him.
That's amazing. That's amazing to see how things can end up when you just reach out and saying, hey, and then everything can go however from that on, but at least as you connect and you have a good start to keep it up.
Exactly. And that's how I sort of, that was a moment for me, the sparking moment that I thought, okay, fan engagement, that is what I would like to do.
And then when you got back, then you also went further for a master's program in Belgium. And when you were almost done with that, then you sought a vacancy job at AZ Alkmaar in the Dutch football club. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of curious because you have talked a lot about, this is a very new area. We don't really speak about fans in that way. And then you started up your consultancy. which was a big challenge, if I understood it correctly, in the beginning, because people were telling you that no, this is not, we're not doing this in this sort of way.
You've done your research well.
Which also helped you to sort of like, well, this is my motivation. I'm gonna prove that they're wrong. But when you saw this vacancy at Alkmaar, what was the title? Because if they didn't know what it was, how did they know that you were the right one? And sort of like, how could they have a trust in you, what you wanted to do, since I guess the lack of knowledge was already there?
Yeah, so we're taking a step forward of a couple of years. So I was in Australia in 2012, and I got hired at AZ Alkmaar in 2016 after 2 years of masters. And before that, I've done 1.5 years of my own consultancy, where I kind of understood that, okay, I need more theoretical knowledge before I could actually be taken seriously by such an alpha industry is which football is. So I did the master's degree. Then again, second time that I was very lucky that there was an opening at AZ Alkmaar, and it was around the corner of my house, sort of. So that was very lucky. And this was in 2016, where the buzz around fan engagement had already been going for quite a while. It's something that I've been just from a passion perspective, have been positioning myself in for many years already. So that's also the kind of the conversation that I had with them during the hiring process already. So, and this is of course the moment that every manager in the football industry said, we need to do something with fan engagement. So you hire someone that does that, right? And that's the same as it started with social media. We need to do something with social media, and then you give the channels to the interns, which I think is the worst strategy to do. But anyways, that's how it happened, and that's how also this fan engagement trend gets picked up by the industry, or being handled by the industry. But now, yeah, officially my role was marketing executive, but because you're traditionally understaffed in a football club, there's so many projects or so many domains within marketing that are just ready to be picked up. So I picked up data and I picked up fan engagement, and those were sort of the focus points in my role.
So it wasn't like they said like, you're gonna do this and this. It was more like an open approach of, we need to improve our marketing efforts in some way, and then depending on who they picked in, they could have sort of steered the way in whatever they would like.
Well, yeah, of course they did have some direction, because they did have an idea of what we want to do. And the CEO of the football club, Robert Eenhoorn, is an old professional baseball player. Used to play in the MLB. I will say MLS, but this is MLB, of course. So he used to play in the MLB for many, many years. And one of his closest friends is Billy Beane, which we all know from Moneyball. So he already got infected in his early years with the data trend. And that was indeed something they were looking for the marketing department as well. Someone that knows, understands how to work with data. So that was as I said, I picked up the CRM and the fan engagement part, because those are both areas I think that can very well be linked together. And that's something that just a lucky shot. I mentioned during the hiring process with the CEO there as well, and that's the moment that he was sold, that I was going to pick up the data part, where the fan engagement was never really to be a part of my role, but it's just something that, as I said, that's my focus point by heart. So that's something I picked up next to what I was actually going to pick up, which is data.
Well, it's an interesting story, because it's also, we have a lot of people listening to this where they, also trying to get a job, and that is, I guess, a huge feedback for them in order like believe in yourself and your strengths and skills, and sort of like emphasizing them, and also try to see what the clubs or the employer really need, mm-hmm. and try to hit on those points instead of just hoping to just be there and be lucky to be part of the interview, instead of putting on your skills and what you believe in.
Especially when you're just starting out. First job, very, very important. And in that job, it's always important to just do what's being asked, learn along the way, but also all the hustle that I've done before that, before I got hired in 2016. I've already been marketing my fan engagement approach since 2000. 2013 when I returned, February 2013 from Australia. So it took me kind of 3 years of volunteering at sports events, of writing blog posts, of attending conferences, etc., before I actually got to get hired at a football club. So a lot of it is a lot of it is actually doing a lot of work up front to actually show to stick out of the crowd, because there's so many people that are hunting for the same job that you need to do something to stick out of the crowd. Plus, you need luck. I got lucky that I got approached via LinkedIn, or else I would have never met Mark Redley, would have probably never got that fan engagement approach, would have never gotten the job at AZ if it wasn't available. So there's also big parts of luck, and you can't control everything, but the parts that you can, that I think is most important, to just go all in and see if you can make it work.
Definitely. Good points. Well, with all of this, and like you're working with a lot with data points in general, are they coming from like sorry, my voice got injured.
It's the season.
Exactly. Are they coming from like your studies from uni, like how you work with methods and the data points in itself, or is it that something that you have been self-taught?
It could be self-taught, but I got it from my master's degree mostly, because it's a social scientific degree, and data in the end, the data pre-processing, data processing, data reporting, those steps are all roughly the same. Of course, there may be some people listening now like, what are you saying, Bas? Not completely not true. I know data pre-processing of text data is different than numerical data, blah, blah, blah. But just for the rough outline, data processing is the same. And it's about the data collection methods that are different. So if you work, for example, in CRM in a football club, data gets collected by transactions being done, etc., registrations being done, blah, blah, blah. Social scientific data gets collected by observational research, survey data, focus groups, or whatever. So, but as soon as that data is collected, the processing part, yes, there are nuances. Social science uses SPSS, and CRM uses more like programming languages, SQL, etc. But the processes, the things are the same. So that's something that I was able to apply from my master's degree straight into my job at AZ.
So basically, if people are curious to dig into the field of fan engagement and CRM, then you would advise them to look into SPSS and SQLS programs, or what would you say?
SPSS is a very statistical method, and there are some differences between statistics and machine learning that I wouldn't go into too deep here. But I would say find a programming language that you can work with, you can understand. R is easier. SQL definitely is the future within. I mean, we all know that there's this datafication of the world happening. So that will be part of your standard skill set, like speaking English and knowing how to write in just human language. Now, writing computer language would be the next step. So a programming language, how to handle data, I think that's definitely something that this should be part of the standard toolkit of professionals wanting to break in. Also because there's still such a shortage of it. So there's such a shortage of people that understand data. And it's not just the data skills, it's the domain knowledge that adds the other element. And that's so important, because just being able how to manage, manipulate, report on data, that is not enough. You need to have that domain knowledge as well, because in the end, there's the group that does not understand the data elements would always be bigger than the part that does understand the data elements. So domain knowledge allows you to translate it successfully, translate data into an insight, and translating the insight into an action. That is where the domain knowledge of this data expert becomes vital. And that's still a battle that will continue for quite some time, finding right people that can translate data into insights and into actions.
Well, there's a big space there to dig into, and it looks like there's a good potential for future work to be improved and expand for a lot of people that are curious about this field, that start digging into these different programs, but especially start just working, and as you were mentioning, network and be part of different events and internships that you can be part of, and then suddenly, if you get luck, then you get a job in the fan engagement sector.
Yeah, exactly. It's the what you're mentioning this in between the lines, the internships, but that's very important as well, because in the Dutch educational system, you need to do 2 internships at companies. So I did mine in Eurosport and Eredivisie Live. Again, got a bit lucky, but networking and stuff. So internships are very important, but also just doing stuff on the side. I mean, I've worked at the Australian Open on the side while I was working in bars, also in Melbourne. And I was working at the Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre just by walking in with a resume saying, hey, I just moved here from Europe. I got my degree. Can I do something here? And I worked in events, which is completely not something I'm interested in, but at least it got me a foot in the door to later work with the management of the sports facility. So always doing stuff on the side. It's just good fun as well, working at events. I mean, of course, listeners of a podcast could not see this, but behind me there's like a yellow jersey hanging from the Australian hockey team, which was here in 2014, if I recall correctly, in the field hockey here in the Netherlands. And I was team liaison of the Australian men's hockey team. Did I got any money for it? Nothing. But it was an amazing experience, 2 weeks of my life that when I'm 80 years old, I will still speak of these 2 weeks, which was amazing. And the team actually won the World Championship as well. So I was against the Dutch in the final, crushed them. So I was the only Dutch person celebrating afterwards. But these kind of things, it's just good experience as well. And it adds to your resume.
That's first of all, it's a good story with the Australian hockey team, but also very important. Like, there's no shortage just to jump into a new job. Sure, you can be really lucky with that, but in general, there's so much behind the scenes that we don't really hear about. It's more like you get that person goes to this job and that's it. But actually, there's so much more behind before getting the job.
Hours of networking behind that. That is indeed something that is not exposed enough, but so important. To just call up someone, hey, how's it going? I did the same with my internship coordinator of Eurosport, which was my first one, which was in 2009. I just got back in touch with him again. Just, hey, how's it going? How's what's going on your end? And just updating each other every now and then. And now actually he told me, I'm working here somewhere and he might have a project for you. So, but that was not my first intention. Yeah, networking is vital. It's almost everything in sports.
Definitely. And speaking of networking, let's now dig into a little bit more of your expertise area. And I mean, I can give you like the most difficult question, what fan engagement is and how you can describe it. But since we have so many people out there that sort of, they have some sort of sense of what fan engagement could be like, could you try to give a very simple idea of what we are talking about when we are talking about fan engagement?
Yes, to me, this I already have to emphasize, to me, because there's so many interpretations, and that is my interpretation is not the only one and not the right one or whatever. You could always challenge that. So I definitely encourage people to do so. But to me, fan engagement is I've written a scientific definition a while ago that I really liked, and there were a couple of elements in there where they say it's building the relationship between the club and the fan in non-transactional exchanges. And this non-transactional part to me is vital, because I see that the public interpretation of fan engagement is sort of deviating from what I've learned back in 2012 at that conference in Australia from all these club executives. That it's about relationship building and making sure that your fans are happy, because happy customers they return. And I know the customer part is not always the preferred term for this, but if you do consider it in that way, other industries are way more advanced with making sure that customers are happy. So if you sort of to a certain extent see fans as sort of a customer plus, then at least we get to embed all the principles that we apply to customers in other industries, making sure they're happy, making sure they are returning, making sure they are upselling, for example. That's for the commercial parts, that's relevant. But by the basis, it's a relationship building element based on non-transactional exchanges.
It's a good way of viewing it, and I also heard this about customers before. And depending on where you as a listener are from, then you might already see the fans as customers. Or like in my case, coming from Sweden, we have a lot of emphasis on the volunteering sector in sports, and all the fans, they are owning the clubs, at least 51% of the club. And in those areas over here, for example, then people get quite annoyed when it comes to talking about customers when we're talking about fans and sports in general. So,
well, in your case, then the fans are even your boss. So you should even be treating them better than your customers because it's your boss. But for some reason, that's not the practice how we do it in sports.
No, that's a very good one to actually put it like that. Treat your boss.
Treat your fans like your boss.
Exactly, and hopefully in a good way. But yeah, I think that's a good one, because otherwise it's been a big discussions of like we can't call the fans customers, etc. However, as you're saying, like if they're happy, they will sort of like purchase things that comes into the revenue of the clubs in the long run. So it's more about, okay, how do we make sure that we can actually give them a good experience and being happy staying with the club. So for just to kick off, like if we have people out there listening now and would like to sort of step up their game with fan engagement, what could be sort of like, just to start up with fan engagement, the whole work of it, what would be like maybe 3 things that they could start doing the next coming month to actually work with fan engagement?
Good question. I think this is not very different to how you would tackle any problem inside a business. And first, do your external research. What do your customers, customer plus, your fans, what do they expect from you? What do they want? So start having conversations with your fans other than via socials or via a survey. I've conducted a lot of focus group focus groups with the fans at AZ Alkmaar, because those were always very important to get additional information from the fans. And even though the sample is small, often you do between 5 to 7 people in a focus group, but as long as you select them right, you actually get a very representative sample, and you do a couple of those with different people but matching the same criteria. You get to get a very good understanding of what fans are, what they have to deal with when they come to a game. Something else what you could do is walk the fan journey. And this is something I've learned from Mark Bradley, and he keeps stating it, and I keep stating it as well. Get off your seats during the game. Get out of the luxury box during games and actually walk their walk. Go to games, take the bus from the train station to the stadium, walk their walk, see what's going on, because you have professional eyes to observe what's going on. So observational research is fantastic in this sense if you have a bit of domain knowledge. But understand where are their big queues? Is parking arranged well enough? What other things do fans need to handle? Let me give you an example. I did with the family stand at AZ. I did, after every home game, I had a survey. And from that, I got a couple of times that I got that the queues are way too long in halftime. So what I did is very often I walked around the stadium before the games, see what was going on, where were the fans. Then during the games, sometimes I was sitting in the stands, talking to staff of the bars, how everything's going, blah, blah, blah. But also in halftime, this was for me a very good trigger to see, okay, let me observe myself what's going on. And indeed, the queues were so long that in the family stand, kids were we were basically being pushed against the side of the walls. And this was very easily to be managed with a bit of crowd control. So that's what I reported this back to the security guy and to the security coordinator, and he actually took measures to improve that. And the same with the food and beverage manager took measures to improve that. So that's the second part. Walk the fans walk. Understand what they are going through. Third part, look internally. If I now understand what my fans want, if I've now observed what my fans want, what are the steps? Who's involved internally that I can manage these problems with? Because fan engagement is not a marketing thing. And that's also important to realize that it's not marketing. Fan engagement is something that needs to be carried by the entire organization. As I said, the security coordinator understanding that fans have problems with long queues and kids being pushed away in a family stand. That's not okay. And also the food and beverage, if the quality is not high enough, that will reflect on that those are micro frustrations that will add up to a fan deciding, will I ever come back or not? And in the end, you as a marketeer are the ones that are reaping the results of that. So if you can help the entire organization improve just 3-4%, if you all do that together, you will make drastic improvements in the fan experience itself. But research is by far one of the most important elements. That's why they're step 1 and 2.
3 good tips of starting up. That's great. Thanks. And speaking of all of this, we have a question from Johnny Engström. And he's asking you, Bas, is there any way to measure data of fan engagement itself? And if so, how can you divide fans from the stadium compared to the TV radio audience?
That's yes and no. It's a difficult question. I mean, engagements like social media engagement can be narrowed down to a single metric, like a ratio. I mean, on Twitter, in social science, they use the Twitter interactivity coefficient, which is basically the amount of posts divided by the amount of retweets or responses, which is very simple because it's measurable. And not everything in fan engagement is measurable. And that's the challenge in this domain, that try to find ways how you can measure everything, because measures, if you have measures, then you step away from this is my opinion versus this is your opinion, but you actually have, okay, this is the state of something, of the fan experience in a broader perspective or whatever, and then you can decide on improvements. So yes, there is data that can be collected, but I'm interpreting data wider than what comes from a CRM or a tabular form. Data can be text as well, and data can be reported by someone else as well. So another example that I've done at AZ Alkmaar is that you have the Lego has designed these experience wheels, where you actually, a very nice Danish example, how they actually measure the customer experience from leaving your front door all the way to going to the parking, etc. And that's to experiencing the park and opening your front door again when you return home. Because they've pointed out a lot of touch points in the experience. This is something that I've further developed into a football version. And this is indeed all of a sudden that I've used this to ask 5 families to fill this thing in for them. And that all of a sudden provided me with a small data set of how would you rate the car park experience, for example, the car park availability 1 to 5. And then all of a sudden everything was, we were able to put this in a tabular form, and then you have a small data set on the fan experience which you can then use to improve. So you can do it half a year later again, same exercise, see if there's been improvements or not. So that's sort of how you can create data from fan engagement. very important is text data as well. So if you could actually scroll down Facebook groups, which is now has become quite difficult, but on Twitter you could still do that. There's many ways how you can just get open text boxes and analyze those. Surveying the fans is for me also a very important way it's basically how to get data from fan engagement as well, as long as you ask the right questions and that. So that should be the basis of fan engagement improvement, and that is indeed a way how you can create data.
Do you in any way like research or look on Twitter feeds or Facebook posts or Instagram posts and stuff like that from during like pre-game, during a game, post-game, that you consider for the whole fan engagement work?
When I analyze club channels, yes, of course. But fan responses under that, could be. But that's always connected to a game. And fan engagement is not game related, or it should not be game related. So that's why my research work and what I advise football clubs always to do is to do continuous measures rather than just one. Because if you do one measure and you happen to have won that game, which was a difficult game, you'll get very positive responses. Or if you lost that game, you would get very negative responses, which do not reflect reality. So that's why at AZ as well, every home game, I send out a survey 30 minutes after the end of the game to all general admission ticket holders, because season ticket holders, you see them every game, so you can do that twice a year, for example. But after every home game, I always send out the survey. And that was the basis for the improvement document of fan engagement, because multiple measures eliminate the match outcome basically.
And we keep going here. We have another follow-up within this aspect here from Clive Chifamba from Twitter. He asked, what is the biggest fan engagement challenge for organizations post-COVID, and how to best use data for fan engagement in nations that have low internet usage?
Ooh, those are two questions. The second one, with low internet usage, it's more challenging, of course, because a CRM fills itself when you have online ticket sales, etc. But you could still try to collect data during if you have 100% door sales, you can still try to collect data just by simply asking people, okay, what's your first name, last name, date of birth? Everyone, bum, 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 bum. Like in that way, an email address if you want to recontact them, of course. But just by this part, you could already, just by the date of birth, you could already kind of start to, if you do multiple measures like this, do this for a year at every home game, you could already start creating very small demographic profiles on who visits what game. You would probably find out very soon that families often visit Sunday games, where friend groups, guys like you and me on our age, we go on Saturday evenings, because then you can hit the bars afterwards and stuff. So that's something they would find out. But data is not just gathered by ticketing, online ticketing or online merchandising. Data is also gathered by, as I mentioned before, observational research, which I find it funny that within this conversation, I've mentioned this already a couple of times, because I feel that this doesn't happen enough. Observational research is data and doesn't happen enough, but contains so much information. So low internet usage, start observing, start asking fans, start talking to them, start focus groups. You don't need internet for that. Now, the first part of the question, I don't remember.
Well, it's actually the biggest, or like, what are the biggest fan engagement challenges for organizations post-COVID?
That's a good question. I read something interesting from the Deloitte. Deloitte publishes like a fan engagement report every year, and they said something very interesting, which was around trust is going to be very important post-COVID. And I really liked that element, because indeed trust is going to be a very important element now, also because of this societal environment where where football operates in and where football fans are part of. So trust state broke down into, can I, post-COVID, trust that a football stadium is safe? And that is a very important one as well, because if you go with families or with, we all know that football audiences are aging, meaning you slowly but surely get into a more vulnerable health environment as well. So if stadiums are no safe environments post-COVID, whenever there will be, if they are not safe environments for that, you will get groups of fans that will evade going to the stadium. They will not come to the stadiums anymore. But also, is the physical location safe? There's now been in the Netherlands for weeks already quite some violence inside the stadiums post-COVID. There's a lot of, it seems like people are reacting based on all the from the 1.5 year that they have been in lockdown, or that we haven't been able to go to the stadium. There's a lot of violence in the stadiums now, and this is always a very important element. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, is it a safe environment to bring your children to? Because children are the new layers of fans. We all know that. But if we don't provide a safe environment for people to bring their children to, then you will that process of generating new fans will stagnate as well. So that's one part of trust. The other part is, can I trust that my financial concerns are being served? Do I still have enough money to spend on my football club? But will I also, are they thinking along with me if I cannot pay my season ticket, for example? And you saw great responses by a lot of football clubs. Motherwell, for example, a client I work with, they actually gave free renewals because people that paid last season and they haven't seen any game, they said, you know what, we still owe you this one. So that's a very good way of building that trust as well. And the third part of trust that they mentioned, very interesting. Can I trust that the club handles my personal information with care? And that's, again, an element post-COVID of trust. I don't know if that's very related to COVID, but it's just a societal element that we're seeing now, that privacy is being challenged in so many different ways. And the public worldwide debate is going on of what is privacy. And privacy is, again, a matter of trust. So I'm not sure if people are not doing any online sales because of the privacy area, but the fact that if you do not, as a football club, comply to these rules, if that comes out, you're screwed. So this trust element post-COVID, which Deloitte has pointed out in their most recent report, is something I can completely follow and really like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Trust is definitely something that we should consider more now than ever before. Especially
in the fan environment, because that's maybe nice to emphasize that this is the difference between fans and customers. Customers, you purchase a product and you consume the product, and either you're happy with it or not. Fans is something else. There's the customers element, plus it's a culture. It's a societal group. You're part of the in-group versus the out-group, which is often the other team. The trust amongst each other. Can I trust that this is a safe environment where my buddies will actually be my buddies here? So many extra elements to this, but that trust part, especially if it comes to the social scientific part of being a fan, that is very important there as well. So to me, spot on what Deloitte said.
Interesting. And now picking up this part of when we talk about digital, with everything with data points and also being live at a physical event and etc. Stefan Schneider asked, do you think future fan engagement will be more digitally, or are fans seeking for more analog interactions?
Compare this to work, perhaps. There's two streams, sort of. There's people that say, you know what, I completely am comfortable with this working from home, digitally, etc. Then there's this other stream that as soon as the lockdowns were pulled, started going back to the office, because I've heard it a lot around me as well, and I've read a lot of news articles around it, researches that have been done, that people crave social interaction. People crave going back to the office to have this stupid Monday morning conversations at the coffee machine about your favorite football club, those kind of things. We are, I'm reading the Homo sapiens book now, so it's really top of mind now, but we are social animals in the end. So yes, digital is a nice replacement to some extent, but I believe that fans will still return to stadiums, because you experience your fandom in a completely different way that cannot be replicated by digital channels. Having said that, I think the hybrid form here, again, is the right way. So match days, you go to the stadium, and that will still remain. That cannot be replaced by how perfect the TV product is as well. But on non-match days, if we have the time, I think that content will play a huge role, but also just how you serve out fandom through the digital channels. I don't like the quietness that you get on Tuesdays, Wednesdays from football clubs, because they think we're not relevant now. To a fan, you're always relevant. Always push out, but moderate it. So not everyone's waiting for your content, but find the right content that they do consume. When do they consume it? And adjust your content planning on that.
And we have from Johan Ayermark from Twitter, as well as Seb Amberell from Twitter. They sort of ask, how can small clubs either without a real fan base or, with minimal resources, how can they use CRM to be successful?
Everyone starts with a small fan base. That's a bit of like a downer to say, of course, but now every club has a fan base, and every club has the opportunity to communicate with your fans in a one-on-one way. If you haven't started yet, you have no centralized CRM where everyone's working with these days, or trying to work with, or exploring how to. I haven't seen a club yet that does not have any data at all. There's always this online ticketing platform. There's always this merchandising website. There's always this list of people that have participated in some event that you organized last year. These are 3 data sources already. So the point is, connect these together in a centralized CRM. If you can, you don't always have to, but ticketing data by itself is already so extremely rich. I think it already provides like 80% of the information that you need in a full customer overview in an ideal situation. So because there's so much demographic information in there, that just getting that ticketing data, you already have age of people, you already have where your people live, how far from the stadium away, how often do they come to your events, which events do they come to, do they have a season ticket or not, do they bring other people to the stadium or not. So these are all factors that are hidden in your ticketing database, but you need to start asking the questions to data. Data by itself is very dumb. Data doesn't do anything. You need to ask it questions. And I once heard data you can interrogate, and it gives you the answers you want. You want to hear as long as you torture the data enough. And that's true. You can extract so much information from the data as long as you start asking it questions. And I think that's the good starting point to summarize my long answer. Start first exploring, okay, do we actually have any data anywhere? Most likely you end up with your ticketing data. That's a very nice starting point. See if you can extract that into Excel. And Excel is very powerful. And see if you can already explore and get some information from that. And from there on, you can start building with connecting an email provider. Perhaps you want to have your data centralized in a CRM piece of software. So
good. Thanks. And hopefully that it makes a little bit sense for Johan and Seban. Well, Seth Kirby asked you a little bit. Actually, right now we have had the COP26 climate conference, or how we should say it, the big discussion about the climate. And he said, like, how do we keep fans engaged about ongoing and supposedly more mundane targets, such as how the club has continued to reduce their carbon emissions?
Yes, that was a great question, and I've put a lot of thoughts into it. And this feels like it comes down to a communication issue. So, because if you are indeed doing stuff to help the climate, let me get an example of the Johan Cruyff Arena here in Amsterdam. They are doing so much. They are sort of like a field lab in the region, together with the municipality, together with Huawei, who does a lot of testing, and a lot of companies have tapped into that. Big companies, your Vattenfall, for example, is also part of that. And that's the field lab there, because every 2 weeks they get a massive group of people together, and the Johan Cruyff Arena openly communicates on what are they doing to lower their carbon footprint. And that's a very good point that Seth is raising, because this is indeed, you cannot see fandom separate as societal problems. These things are intertwined. And you see a lot of initiatives happening in sports to decrease the carbon footprint. I think it was Lord's Cricket Ground in London that has replaced single-use plastic cups, 4XL cups that you purchase them for, I don't know, £2 or whatever, and that's the cup that you keep using for the rest of the event. These kind of things. But also back to the Johan Cruyff Arena example, they communicate openly on where are we with the stadium. We use rainwater to flush the toilets, and we use the solar panels on the roof to load the batteries, the big batteries that they've built under the stadium that then produce the power to the stadium. So everyone is doing its effort as far as they can. And I think this, if you're doing this as a football club, and you by far you should, then communicate openly. It's something that fans can connect to. It's something that fans can identify with. And it brings then again an additional layer of pride of this is what my club is doing. Is it a purchase argument? Not 100% sure. But again, it adds up to the positive interpretations that you can have on your club. And great question. Fandom cannot be seen separate as societal problems that we have.
Cool. And Krista Simpson asked you she is actually interested in how fan data is ethically managed through CRM over the longer term, in form of like likes and preferences that are changing, and how. And also, like, who owns the data when there are multiple interests in the fan supply chain?
Ooh, that's a big question. She's talking about likes and interests, which kind of leads me to social channels, because that's where you put the likes and the interests. And who owns the data? That's Facebook. That's Twitter. We've all heard that story. So that is the reason why you should start with the data strategy as a football club, because then at least you gain more ownership of your own fans, and you start to understand better what they want on your platforms. So your fans are on the social channels, but they're also on your website, and they're also on your app. And that's the way how you kind of want to start to understand what they do on your channels. Now, the other part of her question was could you help me with this, Jacob?
Who owns the data when there are multiple interests in the fan supply chain?
The person that owns the entity that owns the data is the club. As soon as fans are on the club's platform, the club owns the data, and it's the club's responsibility to make sure that the data is private and being used in such a way that it helps fans to consume their needs in a better way, whether that's just watching on a Monday the results of the game, or whether that's providing new news every day so a fan can keep reading on your website while he's not working in the meantime. So
yeah, and we are coming to an end. There's tons of questions that we received, which is awesome, and you are also doing a great job, Bas, of just hitting a quick answers to all of them. We also want to briefly bring up, like, you have built up together with Jeff Wilson the growing attendance model, where you sort of also have got some great key insights into actually like how is the fan engagement landscapes look like at the moment, and also how we use data in our strategy or not for the clubs. And just to give up some key insights that you have brought up was like 37% of sport organizations have just 1 year data strategy, or there's only 10% of the organizations that have communicated their data objectives across the whole organization. And then you also have brought up like 32% of the organizations never review their data objectives, as well as 29% of sport organizations do not use any form of segmentations within email campaigns. Can you like sort of just, what are your biggest lessons learned from this model and research that you have done with Jeff?
Well, by the way, there are two different elements. You were discussing the growing attendance model, which is a different model I've also developed with Jeff. What you were discussing now was the data maturity model. So I want to emphasize those are two different models.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue on the data maturity model. What we found is that, first of all, we developed the model because there was we understood as consultants that there's a need in the market to understand how do I score on different elements, because it's such an difficult part to visualize. How do I do? That's basically the question that we got often. How do I do? How do I compare to others? So we sat down and tried to combine this into a model. Can we visualize in a way how clubs are doing? And if so, what are those points that they should be caring about? So we had a lot of conversations with the industry, with befriended professionals in the industry, but also with clubs, with FAs, national associations. What is important to you? And we kind of factored this down to 9 points, which was strategy, expertise, a few others, marketing campaigns, analytics, and reporting. And we found that these buckets represent most of the challenges that the clubs are in. So we developed a survey measuring the quality of how a club or a national association performs over these 9 pillars. And we had a lot of clubs filling it in. They participated in it. A lot of NAs participated in it, and that gave us a broad overview of what do clubs and national associations score high on, and what do they score low on? And those are the metrics that you mentioned, indeed. That asking the question how long term is your data strategy? There was indeed 37% that said it's only a 1 year data strategy, which we find fascinating, because strategy by definition is multiple years ahead. So that's not really a strategy. Those are tactics. So that I find interesting. And other observations that we made from this research is that the sports industry still has a lot of growing to do. So the first steps are made. So getting connected to a CRM, getting your sports alliance or your 2 circles or your in-crowd or whatever supplier you have. But then it comes down to, okay, how am I going to operationalize this? How am I going to create a strategy? Where do I want to go? This is already a challenging part for most football clubs anyways. I'm looking at you, football clubs. While you're listening to this, find your strategy of your club. Most of them don't have it. Fascinating. Any other company in any other industry has it. Only in football we get away with not having a strategy. But having that breaks down into the actions that you need to do in the next couple of years. And that's something that we kind of discovered during this research. Everyone got connected to it because, the others do it, so you kind of do it as well. But then what's the next step? Where do I want to go? Do I want to make my data available for commercial partners? Okay, strategic pillar. What do we need to do for that? What data do we need to collect? Where does it come from? How often do I need to update it? Those are the steps that they should be taking. So a 1-year strategy is, for us, not enough. And that's sort of gives us an overview of where the industry sits. The expertise score was, there were a couple of other ones. 2% of organizations never review their data objectives. Again, a standard part of strategy process, we all learned this in business schools, is to have half-a-year reviews, quarterly reviews. Am I still following my strategy? If not, what can we do to adjust it? So this was, again, a shocking discovery. I'm a bit strong with my words here, perhaps, but this is something that I found fascinating. Why not? And here, 29% of sports organizations do not use any form of segmentation within email campaigns. Why? We're now in 2021. If everyone already has it, why are you not using the software that you have? So there's a responsibility to the software providers here as well that need to train the users better. And some software providers do this better than others because some of them are software plus consultancy and others are just merely software. But there's a responsibility for their retention as well, because if clubs don't use it, they will probably pull out after 3-year contract and they will not continue with your service. So this is for the retention of those software providers, also an important element. But overall, we found that there's still a lot of growth to do. Data maturity is a multi-interpretable concept, perhaps, but at least we try to group it into 9 factors, giving a score on those and comparing yourself to the rest of the industry. And in that way, the output will allow you to pull out strategic pillars for the next year. So, hey, I score lower on expertise compared to the average of the industry. Perhaps that's something we should focus on. Should we train someone up? Or should we hire someone external? Or should we find a consultant that can help us with making the next step? Or analytics scores way higher than the average. Great. Apparently, you're very good at that. Are you overperforming? So there's too much time into that. And could you lower that down to compensate some and to put that time into something that scores lower? That's the main thing of this data maturity model, to start these conversations to build a better data strategy.
And on Twitter, Philip Marcus asked you around this model, and especially he was asking around the 69% that don't use data within their strategy. And he also asked you, like, why do you think this is what it is? Like, why is the majority not even using data in their strategy?
You're probably asking the wrong person, because obviously my answer would be I have no idea why they would not. Sure. How to say this?
If we put it like this, those that you have been in working with different clubs, do they have you all of them already been up and running with the data interpreted in the strategy, or have you come along with some that are not using data at all that you're trying to help?
Well, to various degrees. I mean, data in the end is a source of information in the same way that expertise is, or experience, or education. These things are all sources of information as well. So does data need to be part of the strategy? It doesn't have to be, because also as say you're a national association that we want to increase participation. Great. But for that, you need to understand, okay, why is your what is your participation in football under 18s, whatever? What is that now? What is your potential to grow to? And then all of a sudden, we're already talking about data again. So making your objectives smart is measurable. The M is measurable in there. That involves data already. That involves digging into what's the state of my participation now and what is the potential state of my participation. In that regard, I find it still quite shocking that data is not always used. Could I find an explanation? Probably in the sense that senior executives or CEOs or CMOs are not that quick to adapt to these kind of changes as the market is. So there's definitely some growth for the top players in the industry or the top of the food chains inside the club as well, to understand, okay, can I make this move? And this is something that will go slowly. I work now in publishing, also in publishing. They've survived many hits by digital transformations, so they are at least eager to find it. But also in publishing, it still goes kind of slow sometimes. And every industry is always battling with, okay, are my basics in order? Do I have data as part of my strategy? Yes or no? So this doesn't have to be only a football problem. But if we conclude that a lot of clubs are already connected to some sort of data piece of software, then at least you already have everything at your disposal to datafy your strategy. And if then you don't do it, that means that there is a process problem.
Johannes Wohlert and Per Malmqvist asked you a little bit about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and sort of like what are your thoughts and perspectives about NFTs in their role of fan engagement?
Let me start by saying I'm not a crypto expert. I'm not a blockchain expert. So this is already something that is purely my opinion. So my views could be wrong, and challenge me if you have better sources to challenge my thoughts on this. But from a fan engagement perspective, I frown upon these developments. I've mentioned it before. Fandom cannot be seen as isolated, as an isolated thing. It's part of a bigger societal environment. And a lot of people started doing trading stock, for example, with all the money they got left over from the Corona lockdowns. And there's too much money in circulation, so it goes into everywhere now. And this is something that we've seen throughout history, from economic perspective throughout history as well. These parts happen a lot before there's a economic meltdown. So I'm a strong believer in what happened in the past. With that regard, could happen now again as well. It doesn't have to be. So it's from an economic perspective. Now, my biggest concerns with this is that NFTs, I'm not a believer in NFTs because I have no idea what their worth are. And this could be just a lack of experience, or a lack of expertise, but I do not see the value. Why would you spend 2 million for an item that you have the exclusive rights to while there's just the internet? So great to have a specific photo of your favorite football player, and you're the only owner to that. Then what? Are you able to monetize that ownership? No, not yet. So until that happens, NFTs do not provide any commercial value. Now, they often sell this and the fan tokens, the cryptos for clubs and stuff. They sell this from a fan engagement perspective, but there's nothing fan engagement around that. There was a very nice post that I saw there's a guy called Martin on Twitter. I can't recall his last name, but he's very skeptic around these cryptos as well, and I really like his take on it. For example, Falcao had put something out on the socials saying like, okay, crypto or fan token owners, you can now vote on the way how I'm going to celebrate my next goal. And that to them is then the fan engagement part. That's why you should own fan tokens, because then you can vote on that. Yeah, that's a great way to monetize on a spontaneous something spontaneous, a celebration to that. So I don't see the fan engagement part in owning fan tokens. In fact, there's been a very good research by The Atlantic showing pump and dump schemes. So a pump and dump scheme is you buy something, then you hype it up, and Elon Musk is a very good example of this. You hype something, first you buy, then you hype something, so the price goes up, and then you sell it. And that's what happens a lot with these fan tokens. So there's evidence that this happened with the Messi transfer to Paris Saint-Germain, where a lot of tokens were purchased. Then Messi went to Paris Saint-Germain. The price went up crazily, like tenfold. It went up, and then people started selling their profits. So I'm not against blockchain. I'm not against it at all. But the people owning these cryptos or having the more information, I don't trust them, because they have this pump and dump strategies to make money off fans. And do fans get anything in return for owning the club fan tokens? Not that much. It's stuff you should be doing without those fan tokens anyways, except for voting on goal celebrations. Let players keep doing that themselves. But it's and by definition, I think we started the conversation with non-transactional exchanges, and this is a transactional exchange between fans and the club. So this is not fan engagement to me.
That's a good conclusion of that. Thanks for sharing those, even though it's not your expert area as you're saying, but it's good to hear from a fan engagement expert's perspective of that part. Lastly, we also have Magnus Ruiz asked, will fans rule the clubs in the future? And if so, why?
I like that you already mentioned the 50+1 rule in Denmark or Sweden, I think you mentioned. That's something they have in Germany as well. And that's a very good protective element because at least ownership remains from the fans. And I'm working on a project with Motherwell Club in Scotland, and they are owned by the fans. The Welsh Society owns the majority, if not all, of the stock of the club. So they are always in control. And I think the fans indeed, and again, here's a difference between customers and fans. The fans know often what the culture of a club is better than anyone in the office. Club culture is something created by the fans, owned by the fans, and they know what it is better than anyone. If you see the example of Cardiff City, when they changed the logo, everyone freaks out. Leeds United changes the logo, everyone freaks out. Makes sense. You're touching something that's theirs, not yours, as a marketeer. So will fans rule the club in the future? Not 100% sure if it's always the right thing, because fans also, if they don't like change that much. So is that the best thing? No. I think it's always good to think about what does it mean, rule the club. I would like to elaborate with this on this with Magnus on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever he asked this question. But I do think that ownership to some extent is good for protecting what the club is, the identity of the club, the values of the club. So, and this is what Welsh Society and Motherwell do well. And I've been able to look behind the curtains now for months. They work really well together. The Welsh Society completely understands. They're not a bunch of hooligans. These are people with full-time, well-paid jobs next to it while being part of the Welsh Society. And they completely understand if the club needs to make a decision to go right or left. But as long as you explain it well to the fans, they will understand as well. And this collaboration between the Welsh Society and Motherwell is fantastic. And I think it's an example for everyone, for other clubs as well to take. So let me conclude with that. Yes, it could work. Do fans rule the clubs? I don't think that's the right thing, but look for the right examples. They're out there, and see if you can copy a lot of those things there.
Great. So last piece here, we got from several, including Marcha Boys and Johan Gottgård and several more. We got plenty of questions here, Bas. But in general, most of them are also asking sort of like, what are the trends that you see in the near future around fan engagement?
I think we discussed this before. I think the hybrid form of fandom will become more of a thing, especially now that new lockdowns are hanging above our heads. Maybe we cannot go to the stadium again. for a while. So the hybrid fandom is there to stay, and therefore that means that content production and consumption and distribution will become more important. So how do clubs? What kind of content do clubs produce? That is number one. Start evaluating that. That's vital, because not all the content that is being produced is consumed by the fans. So start doing more of what they read or watch, and start doing less of that. Monetizing content will become an important element. This podcast is for free for everyone to listen to, but you're probably also thinking with a question in the back of your mind, like, how can I make money of this? Am I going to do this advertising model, or am I going to do this membership model? There are some platforms out there already that provide membership structures for content, and very famous one is OnlyFans. Now, it's very pornographic these days, but they already said that they want to change that. And if they manage to do so, I think that's a very interesting model for putting podcasts behind a paywall over there. But also with Fangage, which is like a startup here in Amsterdam, who does exactly the same, but within the music industry. So exclusive mixes by DJs behind a paywall. So, and since micropayments are so embedded in our life now anyways, I think that's definitely a trend that we'll keep working on. But again, as long as the content is right. Now, I do see also a lot of, I think the product diversification will continue. So developing new products in new markets, which is like esports, completely new market. Because you want to reach new audiences, you start doing something completely different. Also, something I still need to see if, so far it costs a lot of money and events make a lot of money, but there's clubs are investing in it and are not reaping the full commercial benefits from that. So I think that exploration will continue. Market development, you see more and more. Feyenoord is, for example, a club here in the Netherlands that just joined women's football this year. And you may say, wow, that's very late. Yes, but there are so many clubs who are not doing that yet. Where there are so many, the women's football audience is so different than men's football audience. And apparently there is an appetite. It's just that clubs are not catering to that yet. So I would like to invite all clubs, start exploring women's football more, because also those are audiences that you can connect with and help your partners with to connect with. So that's a vital role for you to play. Another trend, I think, the data infrastructures remain important as well. So getting all the data together, because if you do so, you are having better insights on your fans. What do they do? How do they connect with you? And can you help fans connect in the right way? And the monetization of content, as I said. So that's very important. Another one thing that I want to add to this is Stats Perform, also a report. I read a lot of these reports. What they said about this is also the monetizing content, but they also said that they measured it and they asked 150 executives around the sports industry, and they reported that they see as a trend that slightly more on reducing audience churn. So that is still a thing. So that's a big role for the CRM software there to play, machine learning, etc. But also connecting the connecting experience across all platforms as a big trend. So connecting all the different platforms where you communicate with your fans again into a centralized view. So that's what Stats Perform says on that. And that's following that as well.
Several trends to look forward to in that case, which seems like no matter where you in the audience are or working with, or if you would like to work with, so it feels like there's several different ways to actually go ahead.
Never a dull moment in sports.
Exactly. Well, lastly, for to keep up and as we were talking about in the beginning of networking and staying in contact and so on, since this is an episode that contains so much value, we could probably divide this up in several episodes in order to just get out the full value of it. But no matter what, how can people connect with you, Bas?
On Twitter, I'm quite active on Twitter. So at Bas Schnater with SCH, it's a German last name. There I'm mostly on, but Google me and you will find my LinkedIn, you will find my website, you will find my Twitter. I don't go by any pseudonym. Some people do that. I'm just me on the social channels, so you can find me there. Happy to connect. And also, there's still some questions open, which I may answer later over there. Or if you have questions that you just popped up in your head while listening to this podcast, feel free to shoot them over, and happy to have the conversation always.
That's excellent. And yeah, I mean, since we have so many more questions, perhaps we need to take another one in a few weeks again. But no matter what, I see that you've already been committed to several conversations on my LinkedIn where I posted about this upcoming episode. So thanks for that, Bas.
Another example of networking, by the way.
Exactly. So yeah, let's keep it up. And once again, thanks, Bas, for taking the time. And I mean, it's amazing what you have been through from just picking up the sports marketing 2007 to just being in Australia and sort of like finding your true calling. And now, 2021, see what you have already succeeded with and how confident you are talking about all of this. And it seems like an untouched field so far that we still have to, improve much more. And thanks to you, you're one of those that are helping all of us to actually improve the fan engagement. So thanks for that, Bas. And thanks for sharing your unique story so far.
Thanks for inviting me.
Is there any... Yeah, sure.
I was just going to say thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the people who are listening to the podcast and sharing knowledge. That's all what it does, and that's what you're doing. So that's what it's all about, and that's what you're doing. So that's the way to go forward.
Yeah. And is there anything that you would like to add before we wrap up?
Great conversation. Cannot have these enough. Happy to connect with all the listeners.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Bas, and I wish you a successful week and obviously a successful career, no matter what. But it feels like you're gonna make a lot of great value in the future of your career as well. So thanks for that, and thank for you for all of you that are listening to this episode. It's been an amazing show so far, and it feels like we can continue for forever. But if you have enjoyed it as much as we have had today, then please review and also share this for your own friends and network as well, because that's how we actually grow together. We add value and share it forward. And it's been a lot of lessons learned from this conversation, but it feels like in general what Bas is saying is that start to get to know your audience and your fans just by asking them more or less their name or when they're birth, and then start to use those data to actually apply those into your communication and your work, and review and build a strategy that is longer than 1 year. Those are just the small things that we all actually can make use of from after this episode. So before we leave, we are on Instagram as our main channel, Sport Views Podcast. So feel free to suggest any future guest or any feedback that you have for this episode or anything else around it. With that said, you can find in the show notes Bas contact information. So if you'd like to connect with him or drop him a tweet or so, then just look in the show notes. And that's a wrap for the whole conversation. So thanks again, and we see you around. Take care. Ciao.
Yeah.